Hello, this is Steve Sherlock welcoming you all to this episode of More Perfect Union. We have Michael Walker Jones. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah.
State Rep Jeff Roy.
Good
And
morning.
virtually, we've got two participants, Rachel Plukas and U.S. Rep Jake Auchincloss.
Thank you all for being here. Again, our episode today is minus Peter. Steve has agreed to come in and help us out in terms of the opening and announcing. And why don't we start with the sort of reality that right now, as we're taping, the government is shut down because of the inadequacy of the Congress to deal with everyday people. And that is that right now the Democrats, I think, are putting up what I would call, in my own personal humble opinion, a wonderful, at least, struggle to try to get the ACA supplemental funds that help to lower the cost reinstated again so that 20 million people in this country will not be suffering from 170%, in some cases 200% increases in their monthly premium. With that as a backdrop, we also have the issues surrounding what appear to be some lawlessness on the part of the administration and some threats to not only our cities, but also to a number of folks. And then we have the everyday issues that are continuing to go. I'd like to thank Representative Auchincloss for joining us today and to share his perspective and also some of his thoughts about how we as people, especially here in Franklin, can address these issues that I know from hearing from some of our friends over at the Senior Center in particular that are impacting us every single day.
Jake, do you need oxygen before you can answer those questions?
Let's start with the issue of one that is, I think, evident every day now, and that's ICE. We have had some incidences here in Franklin where some of our residents have been impacted. Representative, I'd really like to sort of get your thoughts about, right now I understand that the Democrats are not in a position to do any kind of effective oversight, but what little is happening, can you give us some insights into what's going on with regard to trying to at least hold ICE accountable for some of their actions, especially in terms of how they're handling some of the detainments and some of the intimidation of U.S. citizens?
Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to the conversation. Let's talk about immigration and ICE at the macro and at the micro level. So at the macro level, I think Americans, despite the venom surrounding the immigration debate, are actually huddled around a big but exhausted and invisible consensus, which is we need strong border security, absolutely, and having 5 million individuals without documentation cross the southern border in the first 18 months of the Biden administration was not acceptable. And we do need to have an orderly and secure process at the southern border. Number two, we are a nation of immigrants. Our economy, our culture is made immeasurably richer by welcoming new arrivals. All of us have a story of how that has affected our own families and neighbors. And we in Massachusetts have been welcoming people to the Bay State for 400 years. We're going to continue to do it. And then finally, we understand that deportation and immigration enforcement is part of border security, but it needs to be done lawfully and with due process. If your feet are on American soil, you get to stand in front of a judge and put the facts forward, trusting in the impartial application of the law. That is who we are as Americans. And the president's creation of an internal police force answerable only to him driving around in unmarked vans, wearing masks, pulling people off the street is totally unacceptable. We here in Greater Boston did not accept quartering the King's troops 250 years ago. We are not going to quarter the president's troops now. And if ICE wants to lawfully deport individuals from jails who are a threat to public safety, as Barack Obama did, absolutely. You break the law here, you're a threat to public safety here, you don't have documentation, you're not contributing to the economy, you're out of here.
Right.
But if you're coming here and you're trying to contribute and raise a family, then we need to have a lawful process for you to be able to live with security with your family. That means, paying back taxes, that means paying a fine, that means learning English, but that ultimately means assimilation and being welcomed as an American. I'm a co-sponsor of bipartisan legislation to get this done. I actually think, ironically, there's more oxygen in Congress to do this right now than there was under the Biden administration for a whole host of political reasons. But I'm committed to the kind of bipartisan immigration reform that may draw some slings and arrows from left and right, but that will ultimately put our immigration system on a pathway towards compassion and functionality. And neither thing is evident right now.
Jake, I want to ask you a question, two questions actually. There must be some middle ground here. We know we need immigration reform. We've needed immigration reform since back in the Reagan years, and
Yes.
we haven't been able to accomplish it. So talk to me about the middle ground. And secondly, if you could, for our guests, give them an understanding of what the difference between a civil detainer and a criminal warrant is, because I think people miss that in how ICE approaches individuals.
Totally. Rather than talking, hand-wavingly about comprehensive immigration reform, which, as you said, Jeff, we've been talking about since Reagan, let me give you a couple of concrete examples of the kinds of things that I think we can do in a bipartisan way. So one is funding for border security and infrastructure, including more Border Patrol agents, but also funding for immigration clerks, magistrate, and judges. So basically, you've got better security to block unlawful entrances or human or drug trafficking. But then you also have a more efficient throughput process for people trying to do it the right way, where they're getting their claims heard in a reasonable amount of time. Another example would be building on the success of how we invited Ukrainians, Afghans, Venezuelans here during the Biden administration. Now, though that process was actually quite different than the process that I think a lot of Bay Staters picture, where the emergency shelters were overcrowded. That was a result of people coming across the southern border without any process. The Venezuela, the Afghan, the Ukraine process was done basically under a program that was a pilot program under Biden. In many measures was actually borrowing from Canadian policies, where employers and nonprofits teamed up together to sponsor individuals who were coming here. So they showed up with both employment and housing broadly secured. It was working. Now, Donald Trump came in and revoked it all and basically upended people's lives who were following the law, and just another example of cruelty and counterproductive practice. But that type of a program is something that you can build on, because it was setting people up for success to come here, and not, giving the state of Massachusetts $1 billion price tag for emergency shelters. And then, Jeff, in terms of your question about civil detainer versus criminal warrant, right? So state and local police authorities, they can have a criminal warrant against somebody for breaking the law, right? For shoplifting, for assault, what have you. ICE operates with civil detainers. That is basically ICE has reason to believe that somebody violated immigration law, and that they make a request for that individual to be detained so that they can issue that warrant and then start deportation proceedings. And so much of the controversy around sanctuary cities or sanctuary states is about that intersection between state and local criminal action and federal civil action. I'm a believer in the 10th Amendment, which is to say that the state government and the federal government are distinct, as they should be, as I think we're all feeling pretty happy that they are these days.
Yeah.
And ICE cannot insist to any local or state law enforcement on the confluence of criminal and civil matters. There can be cooperation if the state or local authority deems that in the public interest, as there was under Obama. And I personally have no issues with state or local authorities taking people who are in jail as a threat to public safety and executing a civil detainment warrant for ICE. But it needs to be done with very strong guardrails, and it needs to be done putting state and local law enforcement in the driver's seat. Jeff, you're a state rep. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I think I've had many a discussion with folks on that very issue. And we have a Supreme Judicial Court that sets out the duties and obligations of our local law enforcement and says in a context they cannot enforce a civil detainer. But a criminal warrant, they certainly can get involved with. And I think, as I have indicated to people, my understanding of what the president was promising to do was to get rid of bad and violent criminals who may be here illegally. And if they have evidence of bad criminal behavior, they should be issuing criminal warrants. And I think the folks in Massachusetts would step up to the plate and help, because we don't want those folks around either. But these civil detainers are a whole different ballgame.
100%.
And it's my understanding.
He said he was going to go to jails, and what he's doing instead is going to volleyball practices in Milford, and he's going to churches, he's going to schools. It's not how people want to see their neighbors treated.
Yeah. And it's my understanding too, and correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, those of you who are practicing attorneys, that it's not just a matter of securing the borders, but in terms of comprehensive immigration law, we need to have a pathway to citizenship. And it's my understanding that just prior to the election, as a matter of fact, there was a bipartisan bill that was tracking and had the bipartisan support of both the House and the Senate, and that there was a particular candidate, I think it was the Republican candidate, who then asked his friends in the legislature, in the Congress, not to pass that law, because he, if elected and stuff, wanted to deal with it. Now, I guess I asked the question.
I think it was more, I want to keep that as a campaign issue, so don't take it away from me.
I think you're right, Jeff. I think you're right. So the question becomes, I think Congress can deal with this and can stop a lot of the angst that we're feeling, not only as citizens, but in the country now, by the passage of these laws. And yet we're willing to sit and watch this travesty happen to our American citizens and to the immigrants who, if they have just a civil detainer, have committed a misdemeanor for the most part, not a criminal act at that particular point.
Being here undocumented is a civil offense.
Is a civil offense.
Not a criminal offense.
Right.
And I think, Congressman Auchincloss, you outlined some great strategies for moving us forward on the immigration front. How is your efforts being received down in Washington, D.C.?
It's a bipartisan bill, and the pathway to citizenship in this bipartisan bill recognizes that individuals who are here without documentation, they committed a civil offense, Jeff, as you said, but not a criminal offense. And we do, there's 10, 12, 14 million of them here in the United States. They have been marbled into our culture and economy. And we think it's appropriate that we recognize that a civil infraction was committed. They pay a fine for that. They pay any back taxes that may be owed. They demonstrate employment, for example, but then they get a pathway to legal status here, and so that they can raise their families with security, as we've been doing, as I said, here in Massachusetts for 400 years. Different than someone who is, here under a civil infraction and has a criminal warrant against them because they're a threat to public safety. Very different situations. I don't think Mike Johnson, candidly, is bringing this bill to the floor anytime soon, for the simple reason that Donald Trump doesn't want Congress involved on any matters of legislation unless he directly tells Mike Johnson what to do. I really can't stress enough how much Mike Johnson has allowed Congress to be institutionally sidelined by someone who has a really strong autocratic bent, and how frustrating it is to be in that institution. And it's not even, to me, fully a left-right thing, right? That's politics. You win some, you lose some, you argue the policy, you try to get to an 80% solution, fine. That's not what Mike Johnson is doing. What Mike Johnson is doing is saying, Article 1, the legislative branch of the Constitution, we're kind of like a steering committee to the president. Well, he'll consult us from time to time. No, man, that's not how it works.
Exactly.
Stand up for your branch of government.
Right. Right. Well, let's take the whole idea, because I'm going to push back to my fellow panelist here and say, I don't think this is an autocratic tendency. I think we are watching an autocrat who is trying their best, not just the president, but also all of his staff, the Department of Justice, the FBI, Homeland Security, push us as citizens toward their having the right way and the only way.
Why do you feel that that's pushback? I couldn't feel more strongly in agreement with you.
Because I don't think we
the congressman feels the same way.
Because I don't think we in the media say it that way enough. I think we say, he's got this and maybe it's moving and that. No, I think we are now in the face of, I think we're past having a constitutional crisis. It is now a constitutional emergency. Let me give you an example. For example, when I see a boat coming off of the coast of Venezuela that's exploded by a United States military missile with the predicate that, we know that those people were narco-terrorists, and therefore, and they were on the way to kill millions of Americans with their drugs, and therefore we have the right to blow them up. I don't know what law book that came out of, but nothing that I have ever seen in the United States. And I don't know where the authority of both the military and the president comes from to do that, because I always thought that, from what I've seen from the Coast Guard and others, that it was, seizure, board your boat, have evidence, take the people to justice. Mm-hmm. In this particular incident, it's a summary judgment of execution that has happened right in front of our eyes as U.S. citizens. And I don't know why there's not a public outcry that says, and that's what I mean by pushback. To me, that's not just an incident to be reported. That's an incident that says our country has done something not only illegal in terms of our own laws, but internationally, and someone needs to be held accountable for what I would call murder on the high seas. Your thoughts?
I'd love to hear Congressman Auchincloss's thoughts on that, because that's one of a myriad of things you're dealing with down in D.C.
Yeah, I think I have two thoughts. First is, while we are right to emphasize the moment we are in, the urgency and the danger that is there, what I don't want to take away from people is a sense of agency and hope. Mm-hmm. Because if we say we're living in an autocracy, I don't think that's an accurate assessment. What I think we are doing is we are seeing a strong man who has captured his party entirely and is trying to take that sort of 35% support that he has and snowball it into a permanently tilted playing field for political competition. And we have agency in this. We have the ability to stop that. We've seen it over and over again in the last 10 months, that when the civil society, the business community, the national security community, and most importantly, the public mobilizes against things, they pull back. And so I don't want people to feel apathetic or enervated. We need people to be engaged, particularly with these No King's Day protests coming up yet again. I encourage everyone to be there. Those protests matter. I will be there because they create common knowledge that even those reluctant Trump voters of 24, who for whatever reason maybe just didn't feel like they could pull the blue lever in 24, even they are recognizing that this guy's out of control. The second reaction I have is, we have a lot of constitutional cleanup to do. And it's not always the most glamorous stuff to talk about, right? But whether it's restoring the power of the purse for Congress, whether it's War Powers Act that has gotten out of control since the 1970s, whether it's Posse Comitatus and the Insurrection Act and the ability of the president to deploy troops, whether it's IEPA and the ability of the president to declare tariffs, the presidency has gotten out of control.
Control,
The
yes.
founders never intended for Article 2 to have this much power.
Yes.
They always intended for, one, the states actually and localities to be the prime drivers of domestic policy, and then two, at the national level, for Congress to be first amongst equals. And we have a lot of work to do to take a bunch of 19th and 20th century laws and tighten them up, because he has blown open a hole. And whether it's Democrat or Republican, I don't want any president to be as powerful as he's trying to become, frankly. I don't think it's good for the country to have a titanic struggle every 4 years to elect basically a temporary dictator.
I couldn't agree with you more on that. And I will tell you, last week I took a trip to Ohio on my presidential museum and libraries tour, and I saw some of the sites of some of our more obscure presidents: Rutherford B. Hayes, Warren G. Harding, William McKinley, James A. Garfield, and William Howard Taft, all Republicans, I might suggest. And I was marveling at their ability to lead and work together and do it in a peaceful and civil manner. And I was saying to myself, why or what is it that has changed in a little over 100 years to make that happen? And I'll tell you, the disappointing thing I saw was when I got to the Garfield House. That's a national park. I was greeted by a sign that said, "Sorry, we're closed because of the government shutdown." And I got a little frustrated at that point. But it's just this search for leadership that we are all on. And, Congressman, I look at you as a bright light in that leadership path, and have always marveled at how you are able to express some of the concerns we have and allay some of the fears that we have. I see you as our future, and I'm glad you're a friend of mine.
Right back at you, Jeff.
Yeah, and I'm glad that again you're in Washington doing the fight, and I will absolutely compliment you on and agree that those of us in Franklin need to exercise our agency, meaning that we need to exercise our particular obligation to protest what I think is not just a grievance, but our anger toward this particular government. And again, we are taping today prior to the weekend of King's Day. I know I'm ready.
King's Day.
No
King's Day. Don't say King's Day.
Did I say King's Day?
You said King's Day.
I must have been thinking about the bread. Okay, lunchtime.
Can I do a segue here?
Yes, go ahead.
Because one of the things that I think a reason we're in this mess is the rise of social media and it being out of control. And I've always viewed this problem as emanating from Section 230, a federal law that provided immunity to internet hosting sites so that they wouldn't be responsible for the content on their sites. So, for example, if I write an article for the New York Times or the Boston Globe or a newspaper, it goes through an editorial filter. And if I say something that's wrong or false, there are consequences to me, even under the First Amendment. But if I go out on an internet website, there's absolutely no responsibility for the content, no matter how hateful or false that speech is. And I was thrilled when Congressman Auchincloss was in Franklin, and he talked about a couple of weeks ago work that he's doing to repeal Section 230 of the code. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that work.
Jeff, I appreciate the question. This ties into what I think is an emerging cultural fault line in our society that Democrats had better get on the right side of, which is in real life effort and community and belonging on one side, knowing your neighbors, investing in your local place, building trust with one another. And on the other side, digital dopamine. the merchants and miners of digital dopamine are the social media platforms. They are the online gambling firms, or the pornography outlets that are basically hijacking particularly young people's brains, which are highly sensitive to the dopamine reward system. And they are keeping them endlessly scrolling in an economy that's all about capturing their attention spans and using it for marketing dollars. And this economy, which has really blossomed over the last 15 years since smartphones with social media apps became ubiquitous, has made Meta and TikTok and Google the wealthiest, most powerful corporations in the history of the world. And not only has Congress not held them to account for the corrosion of civil society, for the effects on adolescent mental health, in the 1990s, Congress gave them blanket immunity.
Yes.
And there's only two other industries that have ever gotten blanket immunity like that from Congress. One was the pharmacy benefit managers. They're the middlemen of drug pricing. And the other is the gun lobby in 2005.
Yeah.
I would just ask our listeners, does that sound like a good idea? We got the gun lobby,
Yeah.
we got the drug pricing middlemen, and we got the social media corporations have basically been told by Washington, D.C., hey, don't worry about it. Don't worry about being sued. Don't worry about standing in a court of law. You do you. If an industry comes to a lawmaker and says, hey, we really need you to help us not get sued by average citizens, the correct answer is not, yeah, sure, let's hook you up with that. The
Don't
correct
do
answer is,
anything
well,
bad.
Yeah.
what are you doing that makes
Right.
you get sued all the time, right?
Yeah.
And so we got to revoke this thing. It's not the only answer for social media. You got a lot more work to do. We should raise the age of internet adulthood. We should ban smartphones in schools across the Commonwealth and across the country. We should tax their digital advertising revenue, use it to fund
Yes.
education and journalism. But it starts with holding them accountable for torts that exist on their platforms, because they try to hide behind the First Amendment. But as you said so well, Jeff, broadcasters, journalists are all subject to tort law. Okay, libel, defamation, slander, harassment, and these platforms should be too, because their algorithms are inherently editorializing.
But isn't that something too? And I know, Rachel, you have a young son, but isn't that something too that can happen in two other places? It doesn't just have to happen at the federal level. For example, Jeff, at the state level, can't the state regulate the things that are inside of its border, even though it's coming from, let's say, another state or even a foreign country?
We are preempted by that federal law. And I'm so thankful that Congressman Auchincloss is leading the effort to change that law, because we can't do
Not only
anything
that-
until it.
Sorry, Jeff.
Yeah.
On that point of preemption, not only is Section 230 making it harder for states, not entirely impossible. You're seeing California and Maryland try to do some things, but the Republicans, as part of this one big beautiful bill, the Republicans tried to take Section 230 and then do it to AI chatbots for the next decade.
Oh,
They wanted
wow.
to make it so that AI chatbots were totally immune from any type of regulation or litigation for a decade. They think it's such a good idea, what we've done with the tech titans, that they want to do it again for AI chatbots. Meanwhile, you've got Meta with its internal documentation saying it's appropriate for their chatbots to have, quote, sensual conversations with 12-year-olds. That's Meta's internal documentation, their proactive guidance
Right.
to their software engineers. And the Republicans think it's a good idea to give these companies 10 years of a free pass.
And we sit here and wonder why we're in a mess.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's been going on since the 1990s.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and it seems to me too, there is a level of parental responsibility here that goes to the allowing of young children access.
Yeah.
I know that one of the things that I've been cheering actually in the last few years has been the elimination of the ability of young kids to have phones in schools during school hours.
Sure.
And I think that shows at least a start of one of the institutions that can sort of claw back and take some responsibility here to help protect our young minds, our young people. I know at some of the universities, for example, some of the universities are cautioning their students around their exposure on social media. And I think some of the businesses even are beginning to say, if you're going to apply for a job here, be careful of what you're putting out there, because some of that material will last forever. And again, some of that is not understood by some of the people who are being, our young people in particular, who are being influenced by that. But I'd like to hear, Rachel, as a parent, how does this impact you as a parent in terms of trying to get your son to limit his access?
Thanks, Michael. The struggle that I have with that and figuring out how to inspire him to want to do other things. I think that's a constant battle that a lot of parents are doing right now. It's the convincing of, hey, look over there. And at the same time, I feel like I fail every day as a parent. I really do, because he gets screen time every single day. If you include school and anything that I have on, is also an exposure that he's got. And then, I've got work to do. I've got so much work to do around the house, and I can rely on, some neighbor friends, and we've got grandparents nearby and things like that do really help. But especially as a single parent, things are, technology is a babysitter, unfortunately.
Wow.
It's interesting, following up on that, and several years ago, I was working on a teen sexting bill, and part of we were trying to avoid punishing and tarnishing young teenagers with offenses that would follow them for the rest of their lives. So as part of a comprehensive fix, we required children who were accused of these offenses to participate in a program that covered media literacy, the dangers of social media, and the danger of reproduction of these types of photographs, to give them a sense of there are lifelong consequences to this behavior you may be engaging in as a teenager, so you should come and learn something about media literacy. And that bill was actually signed into law last year, and we're beginning to see it take shape, and the programs are being developed, and hopefully for parents like Rachel, you'll have the law on your side should your boy go wayward. And I don't think your boy's going to go wayward, because you have a great support network and you're a great mother. So
yeah. And this also brings up the question of, there are some good things that are out there on the net. For example, I know that when my granddaughter, who is, I have two granddaughters, one is 2, one is 3, and they both know this Australian public television supported by the Australian government called
Bluey.
Bluey!
Bluey's great.
Yeah.
All
Isn't
right,
Bluey
people, fill
wonderful?
us in. What is Bluey? Okay, you got some people here who have no clue what you're talking about.
I love the smile on Jake's face and stuff, because every parent in this country
And grandparents.
and grandparent, all right, who's
Blue
plugged
smile
in,
right there.
okay. And one of the things that I guess we don't publicize enough is what I just said in terms of my preamble before, before mentioning Bluey. Supported by the Australian government, okay? Public television, public support of their research and their development. And Bluey happens to be these Australian dogs, okay, that are cartoons. And Bluey is a little girl, her sister, Bingo, and then their mom,
Mom,
and
Mom
dad,
Glory.
mom and dad, and then all of their friends. Okay.
Now, didn't the president take the chainsaw to public television in America?
I guess. Thank you for bringing up my point.
I read your mind, my friend.
Okay, which is that here, and it's interesting that here we sit in the midst of Franklin Public Television
Right.
and Franklin Public Radio. Now, the difference here is we're public access, okay, paid for through cable dollars,
Cable
okay,
subscriptions.
and cable subscriptions, not through governmental funds, but at the same time serving the same purpose. So I guess, Jake, it brings us to this next area of, and I'm going to segue into the funding, and that is this out of control. Congress passes a bill that gets signed into law that appropriates money, and the Unitarian president at this point believes that he can then decide whether or not there is appropriate reason for him to go ahead and release those funds. And I thought that that was law that had been settled.
Well, that's
Yeah,
Congress
so
appropriates.
Yes.
I think there's two things here. One is rescissions and one is impoundment. And they're very different. The rescissions is the president can go back to Congress after money is appropriated and say, actually, I don't want to spend it. Can you give me a permission slip that says I don't have to spend it?
Yes.
That is legal. It's sort of an extraordinary situation that was never meant to be used the way he's trying to use it now. Obviously, Republicans have supplicated themselves to his whims. And so that's how PBS was cut, was through a rescission package. Another example of the constitutional cleanup we have to do, because that shouldn't be how the power of the purse is wielded. The other one is impoundment, which is where he doesn't even ask Congress. He just says, I'm not going to spend it because I don't think it's a good idea. That is settled law. Impoundment's illegal. I don't care what Roosevelt says.
Right.
It is illegal. And even this Supreme Court, I am confident, is not going to uphold impoundment. This Supreme Court may uphold the unitary executive theory that says he's allowed to fire even independent agency officials at will. I think the Supreme Court's wrong about that, and I think ultimately that will be overturned by a future court and should be legislated differently. But I don't even think this Supreme Court would get itself all the way to impoundment, because that is a direct attack on Article 1 power of the purse that I just think is nowhere supported in the Constitution or the jurisprudence.
Well, I'm again, as a citizen and as an old guy, probably the oldest guy here at the table.
We'll help you to the door.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it, because I didn't bring my cane today. But I hate to say that the Supreme Court will do something because it's evidence on its face, because I would never have considered that the president had any inkling to be even a notch above the law. And apparently, a little while ago and stuff in the Biden administration, Supreme Court said that the president has some immunity in terms of his legal actions, but they didn't define, exactly legal actions under what particular set of parameters. It's just that if you're doing your job, you are immune if you're doing your job. Is that just the thought, intent, when we go into, some of those legal characteristics? But let's get into this area of the legal framework right now that we're in. The lower courts seem to be holding steady with what I would call precedent and logic in terms of the law. But as we go, we're also seeing variations. And one of those variations, I think, led to a real problematic outcome. For example, I'm going to take, again, let's go back to immigration for just a second. When the president wanted to send in troops to Oregon, the attorney general in Oregon immediately went to court and was able to get a stay. And so, no, hold on, okay. Right. And then when the administration tried to circumvent that by saying, okay, we're going to federalize instead of the Oregon National Guard. We're going to get the California National Guard. And I think the judge got a little upset about that. Okay. And then said, oh, no, you guys, and then said, no place. You can't go get any National Guard. Well, when the same thing happened in Illinois, I think the Attorney General there was a little, slow on the draw because the president had already gone to, in this case, Texas, and said, we're going to federalize it. But so by the time they got to court, the judge said, let me think about this for a few days. And in that thinking process, rather than give an immediate stay, and I know I'm getting into the weeds, folks who are listening and who are watching, but bear with me for a second. But because of that one little bitty 2-day delay, we have National Guard jumping on a plane in Texas and then coming to Illinois, okay? And even though the judge had warned them, if you bring them here, you may have to send them back, okay? And we end up with a stay, but the troops are still there. They're still sitting there because now they're waiting for this whole thing to play out.
Right.
Lives being disrupted and the whole bit. I guess what I'm saying is our rule of law is holding, but man, is it being tested. The tensile strength now is really starting to, starting to be pushed here.
I want to jump in on that, and because I've been collecting.
Yes, before I let you do that, I'm going to jump in on you.
Okay.
I'm off to work shortly at the Franklin Children's Museum, so I'm going to be dipping out. But there's a plug for the wonderful Children's Museum that is just now a month old. Come and visit us there. Also, thanks, Rep. Auchincloss, for mentioning the awesome event we're going to be having here in Franklin. The No Kings 2 is going to be a blast, and anybody who needs information about that can check it out. I wanted to bring something up for you that happened this morning, actually. I was at the Birchwood Bakery, a place right in downtown, and I was speaking with a mother with two students, autism, nonverbal, number of different challenges that she faces as a parent. And in my work as an educator, we really got talking, and she mentions you. And I was very excited to hear your name brought up in conversation.
I hope it was a good context.
Oh, goodness. Well, what she wanted to share is what I want to share with you, Rep. Auchincloss, because I feel very much the same way, too. She brought up something you read on the floor not too long ago, Betsy Johnson's poem. Yep. And she started speaking about how that meant so much to her. And a crier doesn't normally cry, but she was brought to feeling really empowered by that work that you did and by reading that. So with that, I'm off to help some children play. And thank you for joining us.
And before I jump in, I know that Congressman Auchincloss has to jump off too, so let's give him some closing thoughts as well.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. It's been a fun conversation, Rachel. So good to be with you, gentlemen. So nice to be with you as well. And Jeff, looking forward to coming to Franklin next month as well.
I look forward to seeing you, and thanks for everything you're doing. You are a ray of sunshine and hope. Keep it up.
Thank you very much.
You will.
Take care, Jake.
All right, let me jump into what I was going to talk about in terms of the courts. I've been a lawyer since 1986. I wanted to become a lawyer because of my belief in the justice system and what it can do to save our society. And this is probably the most difficult time for the courts. And I've been collecting all the decisions that have been written, some very profound decisions from the judges. But one I want to particularly call to your attention was done by Judge William Young, who's a United States District Court judge here in Massachusetts, and he filed this 161-page decision on September 30th of 2025. Before he got into analyzing the issues and the laws, and it's a very pointed decision directed at the president and calling him to task for what he's doing. But he included, and I've never seen this in a judicial opinion ever, he had received an anonymous note from
It was anonymous.
Anonymous.
It was anonymous.
and it was and it was back in June of 2025, and
Yeah.
the note read, "Trump has pardons and tanks. What do you have?"
What do you have?
And the judge included that note at the top of the decision with his response. "Dear Mr. or Ms. Anonymous, alone I have nothing but my sense of duty. Together, we the people of the United States, you and me, have our magnificent Constitution. Here's how that works out in a specific case." And he goes
Then he
on
gets
to lay
into-
out.
right.
It's, I commend that to every citizen to read that. And, you know, you don't have to
Yes.
go through all 161 pages, but just bring yourself to it, read it, understand. It'll give you a real glimpse into what's going on here. And I have to say, the courts are going to save us.
Interestingly enough, you're absolutely right, and I'm glad you
Would
brought
you say that
up.
again?
And yes, not only did I see that, but I read all 160 pages.
Good.
It is absolutely wonderful. Not only is it well written, but the way he starts it off, okay, with that little note,
Right.
and then say, hey, here's the only thing I have.
Right.
Let's
have a link to that decision
in
when
the
we
show
air
notes.
this.
Should be able to do that.
Folks, when this goes up, we're going to have that link out there, okay? And yes, you'll be able to access this, because I think it is well worth, even if it's only the first 5 or 6 pages that you read, because he, again, gives his analysis in the first 5, 10, 15, 20 pages, all right? And then he goes into, okay, the application of
line.
the law and
Right.
stuff and all of that. But it's important for us to realize, I think, as the representative said, we have agency. I'm not necessarily attuned to the reality that many of us truly grasp what agency means. So I'm going to put it back in terms that were coming out of my day. We the people have power. We got power. Okay, we're able to do things as citizens, and don't give up that hope. I was raised by my great-grandmother, who was born in 1899. And some of the values that were instilled in me came from her observation of things from the time she was a little girl, and the people who were former slaves who raised her. And I feel very honored and privileged and knowledgeable at this point that I may be the last of my kind to have at least even that sort of touch of the history of this country for well over 120 something years now.
Right.
And one of the things that she instilled as a older Black woman, she was 56 years old when I was 6 years old and she started to raise me, was her belief that things will get better. She had an 8th grade education. And why am I so impassionate now in terms of telling young people and others, get out there, protest? Because that's what she instilled in me, was her knowledge that as a citizen of this country, there were certain things that she was willing to just go out there and throw on the line. Her ability to go out and protest open housing in Louisville, Kentucky, sitting at the counters at Kresge's downtown on 4th Street in Louisville, Kentucky.
She'd be out there on Saturday at
She
the No
would
King,
be,
wouldn't she?
she would be out there on Saturday, okay, with her signs and her stout walk, as she would call it, okay.
And her great-grandson by
and
her side holding her hand.
Absolutely. Her great-grandson either by her side or when I became a teenager, pushing me out there and telling me, Don't you dare, when we were sitting at the counter, don't you dare cry and don't you dare turn around. You sit here as people are spitting on you and calling you names. So, folks, that's what agency means. Courage and power. And this particular judgment on an opinion, not opinion, because judges don't write necessarily opinion.
Well, it's affectionately called an opinion, but it's a decision.
It's a decision.
Legal argument.
Yeah. So I think it's well worth the read. I had so many other questions that I'd love to get the representative to address, but folks, much of that you can do in terms of sending either him a letter or calling the office. I know his staff would love to hear from you. He would love to hear from you. He is our representative here in Franklin. Steve, what do you think, my friend?
There's a whole lot going on. There's a lot of opportunities to be involved. Certainly local and state, not so much this particular year, but certainly the No Kings Rally, if that's something we all need to do, consider at least. Yes.
Yeah. Well, we've come to another end of our journey towards a more perfect union. I'd like to thank all of you. And if you have an opinion, good, bad, or indifferent, if you like us sitting here discussing these issues, especially with some of our guests, we have hopefully some future guests who will help us to either gain better insight and become more knowledgeable and understand more about what's happening. Please let us know. And with that, I'd like to thank our staff, Chris and T, and thank you for sitting in for Peter, Steve, today.
Glad to help.
Representative, it's always good to sit next to you.
No,
Okay.
I'm feeling a lot better having gone through this exercise with so many bright points being raised today. So let's keep it going.
Let's keep it going.
That's how we get to a more perfect union.
Yes.
Next time.
Towards a more perfect union.
Thank you so much for being with us. So long until our next adventure.
This program was made possible by your Franklin friends and neighbors, good folks just like you. Thanks for supporting Franklin TV. And thanks for watching.